Play. Okay, welcome everyone to today's session on violence against women. My name is Shah Hussain. I'll be passing you over to Bex in just a short while. Before we get started at Be More You, we always like to do a minute of mindfulness just to leave behind what's gone before in the day so we can focus ahead for the session. Mindfulness is about being intently aware of how you're feeling, what you're sensing in the present moment, but without interpretation or judgment. So what I'd like everyone to do is just get in a nice and relaxed position in your chair, either lower your gaze or close your eyes. Focus your awareness to your breath, inhalation, exhalation. Don't try to judge your breathing or change it in any way. Any sounds or any distractions, just see them as clouds passing through and bring your attention back to your breath. We're going to do that for 1 minute, starting now. Okay, that's 1 minute up. Feel free to come back into the room. Hope you enjoyed that. Okay, so my name is Shah Hussain. I'm the founder of the Wellness Movement. That's my day job. I run a wellness company for corporates, helping them to humanize the workplace, allowing colleagues to bring their full selves to work. I also run Be More You. I'm one of the founder members. Be More You is a running collective. We're a group of runners that are passionate about community and mental health, and we're on a mission to raise awareness for mental health and provide positive guidance through events, and by creating safe spaces for runners to come and be their authentic selves, a place where they can come to listen, be heard, or be present to the moment and learn new skills to improve their mental health. Our other passions are race relations, climate, and gender equality. And that's what we're here for today with Bex. And Bex is a UN Women Delegate at the 65th Commission on the Status of Women. That was in March. And she's just been appointed as York Labour Women's Officer. And there's many more strings to her bow, but I'm going to let her talk about that. So I'm going to hand it over to you. And just before I do, just want to say thank you all for tuning in, especially for all the men that's turned in today and tuned in, because it's a really important topic. So I'm glad to see so many of you here, and especially to the women as well. So over to you, Bex.
Brilliant, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Great, can everyone see that okay? Does that look okay to you, Shah? Brilliant.
Yep.
Fab. Thank you so much, Shah, for inviting me to talk about this very important topic. So just before we begin, I'd like to note that violence against women and girls is a very heavy topic. So at any point, if you feel like you do need to step out of the webinar, please feel free to do so. And if you need an extra bit of support, you can text SHOUT on 85258. They're a brilliant free 24/7 text service, or you can call the Samaritans. The number is just on the screen there, 116 123. So Shah said, I am York Labour Women's Officer. I'm a delegate, UN Women Delegate to the 65th Commission on the Status of Women, bit of a mouthful. And I'm really passionate about violence against women and girls because it affects every single woman and girl that I know, whether they are aware of this or not. So, as a man, why should you care about gender-based violence? in this case, I'd really like us to focus on gender equality. Gender equality prevents violence against women and girls. It's essential for economic prosperity, and societies that value women and men as equal are safer and healthier. So it really benefits everyone. So gender stereotypes which lead to these inequalities affect men. Traditional stereotypes include pressure to be a real man, to be physically and emotionally strong, and be the main income earner. And many workplaces don't offer men extended parental leave or flexible hours. Men are more likely to drink too much, take unhealthy risks, engage in violence, less likely to seek professional help, and really unfortunately, men are more likely to die by suicide. It's actually the leading cause of death at the moment in young men. So what actually causes men to enact violence on women and girls? A lot of research points to, while there's no single cause for such violence, some of the strongest and most consistent factors are harmful social norms, as I just spoke about, that contribute to gender inequality. And on the screen is one of my favourite memes for gender inequality. Women, like men, we're just cheaper. And this starts from a very young age. I bet you didn't know that boys receive 8 times more attention in the classroom than girls. Girls already receive 11% less pocket money than boys. So that's not just women getting paid less, that's girls as well. And really, unfortunately, children classify jobs and activities as specific to boys and girls, which is a really limiting belief. And it's really unfortunate to see that apparent in children. So this is a screen grab from the UN Women UK CEO Claire Barnett on a delegate briefing, and it shows how inequality grows through a woman's life. So in childhood, it's pretty similar, but by young adulthood, women are already less engaged in STEM degrees. They have less access to credit. Intimate partner violence here is already growing. And by the time they are adults, political representation is far, far less, as is breadwinning and especially STEM careers. So in looking at gender socialization, gender inequalities, gender stereotyping, we need to understand these key terms. So sex, that is purely biological. And this is defined as the divisions, male, female, intersex, into which many organisms can be placed according to reproductive function. But gender is purely a social construct. So this is the sociocultural phenomenon of the divisions into various categories such as male and female, and each associated roles has expectations or stereotypes like the ones we just spoke about for men. And where society is really going wrong at the moment is with gender socialization. It's the process of educating and instructing males and females and trans people as to the norms, behaviours, values, stereotyping of group membership as men or women. So gender socialization leads to these inequalities, which then lead to violence. And I find this slide really, really terrifying. So research by Indiana University showed that girls' toys were associated with physical attractiveness, nurturance, and domestic skill, whereas boys' toys are rated as violent, competitive, exciting, and somewhat dangerous. So we're actively making our children associate with these behaviours from a very young age. And you can see the dichotomy between girls' and boys' toys here. And I'd like to kind of say an anecdote from one of my friends the other day. He has a nephew, and his nephew was pushing around a pram, toy pram, which was his sister's, in the sitting room, and a family member said, "You can't push around a pram is for girls," and gave him a toy gun instead. So we're kind of encouraging these behaviours from a very, very young age. So how can we improve gender equalities in school settings? You know, we need to look at this because gender inequality, as we know, is the leading cause of violence against women and girls. And not just that, 2/3 of female students are being harassed at least once a month. So our girls are getting harassed. So we need to train teachers on how to avoid the language of victim blaming when talking to a student about harassment. And later on in the webinar, I'm going to explain how as a society, we are currently living in a culture of victim blaming. A school environment in which male pupils feel empowered to process their emotions in secondary school, explaining the ways in which men can make women feel safer when in public. And again, I will speak about how you can help women feel safer in public later. And acknowledging that being a man in today's society, it does come with a certain amount of power, but we must not make the connection between power and violence. Being male and being violent, we do not have to enact violence on women and girls. So moving on to running, women who run. I mean, again, these statistics are so shocking. 84% of women have been harassed while running and 70% of men have not. This is a hugely, hugely gendered issue. And what's the worst is that 94% of women said no one helped when they're being harassed. We're at the place in society where it's acceptable to watch harassment happen and not step in, and this has to change. So I'd like to read an account by one of my friend's sisters on this. I was out for a morning walk in Balham at like 6 a.m. It was summer, so full light. I was walking towards Clapham South, where the co-op is now, but it was a building site then. And I walked past an older man who was walking towards me with his dog. I was looking down and I didn't make eye contact, but just remember noticing his dog. And then he just reached out and hit me in the crotch and kept walking. I was so shocked, I just stopped in my tracks and froze, and I didn't say anything. He just kept walking. I cried and I walked home. He hit me so hard that I could feel the impact as I was walking, and I was really scared of walking past men too closely for ages after that. And it's really important that we listen to women and validate them when they tell us about these experiences. So the video I'm going to show you now, this is a trailer of a documentary, and it's about 3 women who went running. 2 of them tragically were killed and never returned home, and it's a reality for a lot of women today.
There's no sound, Bex.
And Shah, I'll speak to you about this offline, but this is a documentary that you can have access to if a community would like to watch it as a collective for free. So I'll put you in contact with Runners Alliance. I now have three more accounts of women speaking about their experiences with running.
Bex, on the last one, I didn't hear any sound.
Oh, okay. How is everyone for sound?
I didn't hear anything. No sound.
Okay. Let me try the next one. Let me just see if... Do we have sound? No sound?
Nope, nothing.
Nope.
Okay.
You have to share the sound. You do it up on the top where it says view options, and there you can unzoom, and then you can click on share sound on the top.
Is it audio settings?
I think it's at the top of your screen, Bex. It says view options.
Is it audio settings? Is that the one? If not, I can link these at the end. I'm not sure I'm seeing the right thing.
If you
You want me
stop
to play
sharing
it?
screen, and then if you go to reshare it, the pop-up window, there's like a little tick that you can tick on the blue box. But if not, the subtitles worked, so we could hear it.
Sorry, I don't think I'm, okay, right.
If not, you could always send us the
Yeah,
links.
might work. Okay, I'll just stop sharing this. Sorry about this, guys. Let me just try.
If you want, I can share it because I've got the presentation as well.
Yeah, Shah, do you mind, because it's 4 videos, they're one after another.
Let me see. Okay.
Doing so well with the tech until now.
Let me just see. Hold on a minute.
Joys of technology.
Mm.
I feel like New York City lights up in a
Yay,
special
there we go.
New York City Marathon. You're giving high fives to kids, to adults that you may give you like a little stink eye.
Oops.
I feel like New York City lights up in a special way for the New York City Marathon. You're giving high fives to kids, to adults that you may give you like a little stink eye on an everyday basis, but you're watching these people actually celebrate your potential victory out there in the course. Even if you fall short and you're like, I only made it to mile 16. The idea that you were daring enough to actually step on that line and do that for that day is something to be celebrated. New York City Marathon is home. I go on this course, I'm having a great morning. I hit between mile 21 and 22 is Marcus Garvey Park. And I make this turn. And this guy, and he said, it's gonna take your fat ass forever. I was like, what did he just say? Like, like when you hear something like that, I was like, maybe he's talking about somebody else. As a person that's in the back of the pack, it's only a handful of you at one given time. So I was like, I'm the only fat person out here that he must be referring to. So I screamed back at him. I said, what did you say? And he said, it's going to take your fat ass forever. And then he's just started running off at the mouth. Why don't you stop eating, fatty? Oh, this is not a walking course. So as the New Yorker that I am, I cursed him back out. And it took for 2 other runners who saw what was going on and they're like, ma'am, it's not worth it. Just continue your race. You're so close to the finish line. But when someone says that, something like that to you, they're already in your head. You may have let it go verbally. You may have let it go physically, but there's a weight that exists in your brain of, great, I can't even have peace at a marathon, a place to where I'm being celebrated on the course, a place that I consider home, and I have to be reminded of my weight. The last 4 miles of the course, I carried that with me. I already am the biggest heckler that I've ever met, even to this day. Anytime I look in the mirror, I can tell myself 10 really terrible things about myself. I don't need this from someone else. Running is the thing that takes me out of my head and reminds me that regardless of how much it sucks out there on that course, regardless of how much I am struggling, I'm reminded of how powerful I am. And no words, no actions, no catcall, no harassment in the world can take away that power when I'm out there running, regardless of my pace.
There's a couple more accounts if you, oh, sorry. There's like 2 more short videos and then we're done with videos after that.
Okay. We get sound on that one.
You have to leave your house with a armor of self-defense, strength, courage, bravery. It is so frustrating because the minute you step out the door, there are catcalls, there are crude lunch conversations, inappropriate suggestions from every single window at every single stoplight, saying whatever they feel at the time. So that in itself takes you out of that headspace of, this is a good run, this is a strong run, my focus is here, because you're constantly prepared for another comment or another moment where you just have to be fully engaged, ready, and prepared. What's better, just to let it happen, to run and in the summer when it's 95 degrees out and I run better in a sports bra, in compression shorts? Do you just allow that to happen and they just go throughout the day, not even realizing how it affects other people? I wonder, do they take a second? Does anyone take a second when they make a comment to think about how that's going to affect the other person on the other side of that comment? Whether it's the right approach or not, my recent defense is to call it out. And it takes a little bit more energy, but I'll say that's not appropriate. Or I'll say that's not welcome. Or do not speak to me that way. Because it at least creates awareness around me of other people to see that that behavior should not be tolerated. And it shouldn't have to be something that we are prepared for the minute we step out for a run every single time. The bigger the spotlight is on any type of behavior, the more awareness we all have towards behavior like that. It becomes so frustrating that I don't want to be silent. I don't want to just allow that to be their lunch entertainment.
There's one more video, Sean, and that's it.
In college, we had a teammate who was actually, after her cross-country practice, she was dragged into a man's van, and her coaches actually saved her. Definitely one of the ones that makes you think twice, because it happened when people were dispersing into the parking lot. She wasn't in a remote location. She was doing everything right. She just was the target. People that would be looking to do anything to a female runner, they don't know that you're training for the Olympics or training for the local 5K. They just see you as alone out there. Not everyone has a big team and a coach with them for every single mile of every single run. We're out running the same trails as your mom and as the JV cross country team and as we're just all out running. You can't really discriminate. You could be in an urban setting, you could be in a rural setting. It's something that you carry in the back of your mind all the time as a woman, that you're smaller than a man, and you know, if you're a runner, you're maybe not as strong, and we don't think about that as being a liability or vulnerability until something like that happens. In fact, we think of it as a strength as a runner, we're light and fast, and that's what makes us good. But there's moments like that where you realize you have to be careful, and to an extent, there's not a lot you can do about it. I've had conversations with male runners where they've admitted they don't have to think about going for the run the way we do, and just how women have to be more conscious of whether they're alone or not, whether they have headphones in and are distracted or not, whether it's dark out, where they go, who knows they're gone. You're always a little bit on guard, I feel like.
Thanks, Shah.
Okay, back to you now.
Thank you. Okay, so as Molly was speaking about, as a woman, before you've left the house, you have to think about all these things. How am I going to protect myself? So even for women that haven't actually been harassed, we are so aware of the violence that is enacted on our gender, and it's constantly on our minds. And this is something which a lot of social researchers call the mental load. Another case of the mental load I want to speak about is domestic labour that women have to do. While we are in work more often, we are still expected to take on the majority of unpaid domestic labour. In fact, we do 60% more unpaid domestic labour, and this has worsened in the pandemic. This emerges from tropes such as women are just the better caregivers, which might seem quite positive on the surface, but I want to show you how this can very quickly lead to increased violence against women. So this is something called benevolent sexism, which is on the surface something might seem like quite a positive trope, but it's actually a gender stereotype. So let's take this example, saying women are just better in caring or domestic roles than men. This then leads to a gender socialization. So women are then expected to undertake more unpaid domestic labor and even caring for family members because we're supposedly better at it, right? This leads to a gender inequality. Women are kept able to do less working hours. We carry out 60% more unpaid domestic labor than men. This leads us to become more dependent And as we know, gender inequality is the leading cause of violence against women. So you can see the impact of how the impact of these tropes and language very quickly leads to violence against women and girls. I want to talk about a social researcher called Jackson Katz. For the last few years, Jackson Katz has been traveling around the world asking groups of men and women what they do to prevent themselves from getting sexually assaulted. And the responses are very different. This is a really powerful chart collating the responses from men and women. He says most of the time men just laugh. They find it funny when he asks the question even. Some of them even joke, oh, I just try and stay out of prison. But when he asks women, it's a very different story. And think about it, the right is what women think about all the time to try and keep ourselves safe. Don't use highway rest areas, for example. I vary my route home from work. Park in well-lit areas. Don't use parking garages. Lock the windows when I sleep, even on hot nights. These are all the things that women are constantly thinking about. So why have we not been able to solve violence against women and girls so far? As Jackson Katz says, these are women's issues. These are women's issues that good men help out with. These are not, sorry, women's issues that good men help out with. These are men's issues. Women are not enacting violence on ourselves. Men are enacting violence on women, and we need to recognize this and start taking accountability to solve this issue. Which brings me very nicely onto the not all men paradox, one of my favorite things to address and talk about. It's important to note that not all men enact violence on women and girls, but all women are affected by violence against women and girls. And this has been shown by the mental load, whether you have been harassed or you haven't, this still affects you as a woman. So here's one of my favorite illustrations. So as humans, we generalize things. For example, we say, be careful of ticks, they carry Lyme disease. But no one says, actually, not all ticks carry Lyme disease. Because logically, we understand that enough ticks carry Lyme disease to put you at risk of being infected. When we speak up about women's oppression and abuse, obviously we know that it's not all men. But when 1 in 3 women are assaulted by a man in their lifetime, it's enough men to make all women afraid. And it's worth noting, when we talk about statistics, they vary based on the definition of assault and based on the research undertaken and where it's being undertaken. It's enough men that when I'm walking home alone at night, I have to assume it's all men to keep myself safe. Just like I have to act as though all ticks have Lyme disease. When you make our abuse about you, it doesn't help anyone. We know that it's not all men, but it's enough men to keep us in a constant state of fear. Another video. Shar, is it okay if you step in this one? Brilliant. So this next video, this is from the United Nations Women UK, and they asked women what they would do if they felt fully safe out and about in society. And this video is called Imagine a World, and it's a collation of the responses. I'll stop sharing.
I'd go to a party and I'd stay out all night.
I would take the train again.
I'd kiss my girlfriend.
I'd go for a run whenever I want to.
I'd feed my baby whenever they need it.
Honestly, I'd leave the house more.
I'd walk to school again.
Thanks, Shar. Okay. There we go. So what can you do as an individual to help stop violence against women and girls? So I'd like to read a quote from Brené Brown. Violence starts with dehumanization. Dehumanization starts with language, and accountability also starts with language. So here is an example of a load of media headlines talking about violence against women and girls. If you look at all of them, there's no active agent in this. Violence against women still rife. Cases of violence against women on the increase, or even how could Donna protect herself? There's no active agent in this. It's perceived as, you know, violence against women is something that just happens. It's not, there's not an active agent in it. So we need to start talking about men's violence against women to solve the problem. It may feel uncomfortable, but we have to be accountable for this. So the first thing you can do, speak up. Challenge harmful masculine norms that encourage violence amongst other men. Order that pink drink. Order a cocktail in front of your mates. You don't have to just order beer at the pub. Choose to speak up. If you hear someone speaking in a sexist or derogatory way towards women, do not be silent. And again, it might seem uncomfortable, but that's calling out your friends and your peers if you hear them speaking in a disrespectful way. And again, one of my favorite quotes from a great trans activist, silence is violence. Take responsibility. Approach gender-based violence as a men's issue. Accept responsibility that violence against women and girls will not end until men become part of the solution to end it. As we've seen in our approaches so far, they have not been successful, and unless we have men on board, we're not going to solve this issue. Take an active role in creating a world that refuses to tolerate violence against women, so we can achieve a world, it's in the UN video, where women and girls feel free to express themselves. Educate yourself. Here's a good place to start. Read books, listen to podcasts on your way to the shop to see a friend, to the pub, watch TED Talks on feminism. I'll also link some at the end of this presentation. Stay updated on the issues that affect women. And overall, listen to the women in your life, believe their stories, and ask how you can help. Society has a habit of not believing women when they talk about violence in this way. Only 1 to 2% of cases of rape are the perpetrators actually convicted. So this shows that it's not just society, our judicial system is failing women. Educate your sons. Yes, men can wear pink. As we know, these harmful tropes lead to gender socializations, which leads to gender inequality, which leads to violence against women and girls. We need to raise boys to break free from harmful stereotypes. And educate your sons and other young men about their responsibility in ending men's violence against women, and we need to call it for what it is, men's violence against women. Take action. When walking behind a woman, respect her personal space and keep your distance. You know that you're not going to harm that woman, that you're not going to harass that woman, but she does not. As I've shown in the not all men analogy, we don't know who the good guy is, who the good guy isn't, and we can't take that risk today. Again, 94% of harassment cases, people don't do anything, so we can't take these risks as women. Offer to walk female friends home and run with female friends, especially at night. If they ask you to walk with them, don't scoff their experience and say, oh, it's just down the road. Women, you have to realize that women's experience in society is vastly different and a lot more dangerous than yours is. Be an active bystander. If you notice a woman is uncomfortable, be an active bystander. Don't turn a blind eye to it. It can literally be as simple as standing between a woman and her harasser to block the line of sight. It's really important to note that in these cases, we don't want to jump in and to confront the perpetrator, because that might make the situation worse for the woman. We need to ask her what she wants, ask the victim what they want. Ask her, would you like me to stay with you for a while until he goes, until you feel safer, and respect her decision. So we will all know somebody that has been assaulted or harassed, very unfortunately. And this statement just shows that when a trauma survivor feels like they have support, it calms the fight or flight response, releases oxytocin, which reduces fear. So support is so important when encouraging a victim to feel safe walking around in society again. Listen to them, check in with them frequently, engage in relaxing activities if they wish, remind them they are loved and supported, and help them get professional support or help. It's worth noting that trauma presents in everybody differently, and do not push somebody to do something which they're not yet ready or comfortable with. And here's some charities and helplines that can help. AVA, Against Violence and Abuse, is an incredible charity, and if you'd like to further your learning on this topic, they do online courses, they also do corporate training. Women's Aid and Refuge, they're charities for domestic abuse. Refuge have a 24/7 helpline. And a service which we all need to be aware of is SARC, Sexual Assault Referral Centre. So this is run by the NHS, and if someone has been assaulted in this way, you can take them to your nearest centre, and they will also make appropriate referrals, say onto Women's Aid or Refuge. So, resources to learn and become a better ally. Jackson Katz is a great place to start. He's on Spotify, he's written a book, and also Runners Alliance. They have a website, and they've also done work with BIPOC and LGBTQ communities. And it's really important to note as well that Black women have the hardest time out of all of us. They are more prone to violence against them. Follow educators such as Gina Martin, Clementine Ford, Safe in the City, and watch their TED Talks. Gina Martin has a great TED Talk on this. You can just search her name on the TED Talk website. And most of all, listen to the women in your life. So thank you so much for listening to my spiel. All voluntary donations are going to go to UN Women UK project. They're doing some really, really great work. They've taken 150 solutions for change to Parliament and launched an across-party parliamentary group, and we are trying so hard to make the safe streets safer for women. Thank you so much. Any questions? I'll hand over to you, Charles. Stop sharing. There you go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to put that presentation together. It was really informative, and I definitely learned a lot there myself. So appreciate that, and thank you everyone for tuning in. If you've got any questions, please put them into the chat box, and I can ask Bex, or we can ask the men in the room as well if there's any specific questions. We have got Mo asked a question, and I think you've answered it as well a little bit in the talk, which was, how can you rebuttal the response, not all men? As sadly, I hear this a lot.
Sorry, could you say that again, Shah? You just faded out halfway through that.
Yeah, Mo's asking, how can you rebuttal the response, not all men?
Yeah, so again, I think I addressed this in my presentation, but not all men enact violence, and we know that. And when we say men, we're talking about a collective, what's happening here. And again, you have to remember that not all men enact this, but all women it affects all women. And especially, you know, when you're out about on the streets as a woman, you don't know who is going to harass you and who isn't. So we have to try and center this problem and center women's voices in this, and not distract from these issues by saying, you know, things like, oh, not all men, because we have to recognize the severity of this issue.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Katie's asked a couple of questions here. First one was, do we know of any examples of men stepping in when a woman was harassed? And yeah, second one, especially to men, this question is, the men in the room here, when did you realize that women around you are affected, feel in danger, whereas as a man, you are not?
So in cases of men stepping in, I can't say any anecdotally. I know that there is, I think the attitudes towards this are changing, and again, awareness is changing. So I really, really hope that men do start to step in more. But kind of as the statistics show, you know, in 94% of harassment cases, nobody does anything, which is a shocking statistic. So this is why we have to have these talks, and we have to show that these attitudes are wrong, and we need to step in, and especially men need to step in these situations to protect women. The second question, I think that's open to the floor.
Yeah, I think I can try and answer that question as well. So obviously been out late at night on a night out, coming out of a nightclub, or bar. You know, it's happened on many occasions where you see females that may be a bit tipsy, and then there's always that they're probably feeling a bit vulnerable. And there's always some men that are lurking around trying to take advantage of that. So you realise that that probably doesn't happen to me as a man. You know, I don't really feel that if I've had a few drinks that someone's going to come and, you know, sexually harass me. So I'll definitely know that that's a position that women find themselves in. You know, they're probably feeling, yeah, in danger, I guess. So that's, yeah. If anyone else wants to share, feel free to join the conversation. I've got one here, I've got Paul Baines. Are there any specific approaches when trying to raise issues about discrimination, gender inequality in the workplace, especially where it's a senior person that's acting wrongly or senior people are acting wrongly?
So I think it depends which gender equalities you're talking about here. For example, if you're talking about offering men more opportunities at work than women, you need to raise the issue of affirmative action. So potentially putting diversity quotas in organisations. For example, the Labour Party, in any panel on any board, you have to have at least 50% women there. So you can talk about things like this. When it comes to issues such as sexual assault, violence against women, again, you need to report those. It can feel very, very difficult when it happens in a workplace environment, especially with senior colleagues, but you really do need to report these to the police, or if you're wanting advice on which steps to take, you can go to Refuge or Women's Aid or any of these charities because they will be able to offer you advice. But again, I think it just varies. It varies in the context, and it can be a very difficult thing when it's in your workplace. So I'm sorry if that's happening.
Yeah, Bex, yeah, I guess the kind of example that I have is senior management who think it's acceptable to make jokes about women, enforce sexist stereotypes. They'll always play it off as humour.
Yeah.
So you try and call it out, and yeah, it might have been humour back in the 1970s, but it's 2021. And it's a case of, yeah, like you said, if something distinct had happened, or something that just, boom, you've definitely crossed the line there, yeah. I think it's quite easy, or for myself, it'd be easy to say, right,
yeah,
you're out of order, this is the kind of thing. But when it's so much on the edge and it's so continuous, and it's that battle of like, okay, I could raise it, but nothing might be done.
Yeah.
And then myself and anyone else in the workplace, you're going to get it back on yourself. So I guess that was the scenario.
Yeah, it's difficult in that situation again when you're working with these people. What I would say is potentially, I mean, if it's between peers and colleagues, you need to tell them that this is unacceptable and this is why, because this leads to violence against women again, and hammer that home. I guess the best thing you could do in that situation is probably anonymously report to HR. Again, it's very difficult and nuanced situation, but this behaviour needs to be called out, and kind of these examples, like, lads chat in pubs or in work, this is where this behaviour stems from, this is where this behaviour is made acceptable. So in any way you can, try to report it. And again, I think the best way to do it is anonymously if you're worried about yourself and the potential consequences there.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. Bex, I've got some more comments here. So we've got an observation by Benita, not a question, but an observation from social media. If women are sharing their feelings about inequality, to respect their opinions. So she just made a comment there. Alex has put something in here. I'll just read it out.
Yeah.
Answering to Katie's question, with my current partner was the first time I'd realised how much women think about the extra things. Previous partners had told me about harassment from their partners, but I'd never realised the extra mental load. It came up initially when my girlfriend kept asking me to walk her to the station in varying levels of daylight. She won't run around the local area without me, and even when we run together, there have been instances where guys catcall across the road or turn around and stare at her in leggings. Yeah. So that's quite common. You know, I've got a friend who regularly posts on social media on the stories about she keeps getting catcalls, inappropriate comments, and that was part of the reason, you know, earlier in the year I wanted to try and create a webinar on the topic to just raise awareness. And then obviously what happened with Sarah Everard sort of made me really think, look, we need to do something really quickly. So it is a really, it's a big issue out here. The society isn't just, and until it is, we've got to keep working together to see what we can do.
Definitely. Yeah.
I've just got here some more comments. So Sebastian in Berlin, he says, I have 2 sons and sometimes I have to re-educate them what they learned from school. Pink colour is a good example, but some schools separate boys and girls at the age of 6 already and prepare boys to fight. How can we act against that when it's their education, it is education politics?
I mean, again, these cases are really difficult because we're not fighting against individuals here, we're fighting against society as a collective, and we're trying to achieve collective change. But the way we're going to do that is speaking up as individuals and talking to these organisations. So again, I'd recommend going to your school and saying, I think this is harmful. I really think this is harmful, and this is difficult and harmful. Gender socialisation, that is going to harm not just the girls, but it's going to harm the boys, and talk to them here. And yeah, pink colour is a good example. I mean, before we've even stepped foot on this planet, we're subject to gender socialisation. I'm sure you've all heard of gender reveal parties where you let off blue balloons if it's a boy and pink balloons if it's a girl. And you think about how ingrained this is. It's so ingrained, and it's so difficult going to talk to these institutions about this. But again, it's just awareness and speaking up, which can feel scary and it can feel difficult, but you really need to speak to the school about this. But it's great that, you know, you're trying to re-educate your sons, because it all stems from them. It sounds like you're doing a good job.
If there's any more comments, if anyone wants to come off mute and speak, that's fine also. If you want to use the comments box, we'll be here for a few more minutes.
I had a quick point. Thanks, Bex, for the great preso. Yeah, I spoke to quite a few friends about this a few weeks ago after the Sarah Everard situation. And I think men in here, if you just want to get a small temperature check with close ones, friends, colleagues, you know, if you just ask them if they've had any experience, if they're willing to share, you won't say, I'm not surprised. You won't be able to count on probably one hand women or family members or colleagues that haven't had a catcall or something worse. Just to go back to what we talked about with sort of labour, you know, it doesn't surprise me that with even this talk, you will probably find a length of women that could hold this talk, but not many men. And also, if you look at the split here, it's going to be always maybe men that don't want to show up. So I would just say this to all the men on the call, you know, to really stand up is to kind of start putting in a bit more labour, to go back to women and to ask them to do the work of going back to that traumatic catcalling, or sadly something worse. It can be a little bit hard work, especially even with racial conversations. Going back to, you know, people to ask them to do the work's hard work. But I think someone mentioned any sort of live cases. I had one a couple of months ago. I met a friend for a coffee at Mile End. I was super early, it started to rain, so I stood under the concourse, and there was a woman just sat there having a coffee. There were 2 small coffee tables where they just had 2 chairs, and a guy, he just sort of was staring at her, sort of made me feel uncomfortable, and her. I noticed this, and this is where I'd say for men, this is where you have to make a choice, read the situation and try and understand, maybe, you know, someone at risk of feeling uncomfortable. So I just repeatedly asked him, are you okay? And I sort of I think we swapped seats, so he was sat on his own, and then he just sort of stared at me like, you know, obviously like I wanted to sit next to the woman. So I felt a bit awkward, but she probably felt more awkward. A few minutes passed, and then her boyfriend came out of the coffee shop. So, you know, she kind of just whispered thank you to me and walked off. And then the gentleman that sat opposite me, he just kind of walked away. So in those situations, it's easy to just do nothing. You might be on the tube, as Shah mentioned, it might be late at night. But it takes just a bit of courage and a bit of discernment to read the room and to make sure, or ask someone if they're okay. And that will galvanize a bit more confidence next time that actually I've given up a bit of my privilege and doing a little bit of labor. That was really little. And when I left that situation, it left my mind. By all means, don't try and be a hero out here, but I think it's definitely men that need to step on and be a bit more active in this, because in reality, it is men that are sadly acting out a lot of violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, everything you said is so relevant. And again, it can just, for you, it might not seem too much to step in, but for a woman, that's very reassuring and can help her to feel safer in public moving forward, not just that one incident. So it's really important that, guys in the room, we do step in.
Okay, there's another question coming in. There's a few observations as well, if anyone wants to read the comments as well, but I think this is the question, I think. It's obviously not a clear-cut split, but how much weight do you think falls on the normalisation of male violence in general, and how much on the power dynamics with gender inequality? As for Matt White.
Sorry, Shah, could you read that again?
Yeah, it's obviously not a clear-cut split, but how much weight do you think falls on the normalisation of male violence in general, and how much on the power dynamics with gender inequality?
I guess it's all linked. It's all linked. You can't. These are things that you can't split. You can't split apart. But yeah, I think these two things go hand in hand. And yeah, you can't. I don't think you can say really.
Yeah. I think Andy's made a comment about a friend getting a taxi home because he was staying late or staying later at a bar or somewhere or a party, and that's something that I've come across as well, where you've got female friends that are saying they're leaving and they don't live too far away, and it might not even be that dark, and they want to get a taxi home, and you don't really think twice about it. But recently I've been thinking more than twice about it, like in my head, like past instances when that's happened, and as to why they say that and why they get a cab rather than perhaps just take a walk or go get a bus, because they're obviously in fear of they're going to, obviously, confront something. There might be someone that they have to confront, so they rather not have that situation.
And yeah, even if you're going out to a party as a woman, you have to think about, how am I getting there? How am I getting home? How are my friends getting there and getting home? It's a lot of thought. And towards the end of the night, I think a lot of women can probably think the same. You're thinking, oh God, now I have to plan my journey home. When should I leave? Or if you're getting a tube, when's the last tube? Women spend a lot of mental resource and also finances on keeping themselves safe.
Yeah, and there's a few observations in the group chat where we had that video showing earlier about the woman saying she speaks out, which is really brave of her, and she obviously feels confident. But some of the comments are, some people don't really feel that safe, especially if it's like a big person as well, or if there's more than one person. It's like, how are they going to do that? What might be the repercussions of that?
And again, as a victim, there is not just because that woman, she spoke up. Yes, you could say that is brave, but there is no right or wrong way to react in the situation. Don't feel you have to be a kind of quotation mark hero and chat back. In that situation, you need to do everything you can to keep yourself safe. And if that is just walking away, then you need to do that. And again, this is why men, you guys need to step in, because that woman is very unsafe on her own. And if you witness catcalling, it's really important to step in to make the woman feel safe as well. Because as a victim of this, there's no right or wrong way to behave. If you feel like, shouting back, and if it's safe enough to do so and you feel like that empowers you, that's great. But equally, if you feel like it's more important for your safety just to remove yourself from the situation, do that as well. And please don't feel guilty for that. This is not a you problem, and you can't just stop this happening by chatting back one time. It's so important that you keep yourself safe.
I just want to say thanks very much, Bex. A really fantastically well-researched presentation as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the comments for fellow guys out there, and for anyone in general, one resource that I found really helpful is the 5D methodology. So there's a training provider in the States called Hollaback, and they do a lot of bystander intervention training. and the 5 Ds, it's kind of direct, so you can call someone out, but if you're potentially afraid of confrontation, then you can sort of distract, so maybe get in the way as you did, Mossen. But there's also other options like delay, check in with the person afterwards, document, but not just kind of sharing it to put up on social media, documenting it so that you can then give it to that person afterwards and say, what do you want to do with this? And then I think the last D was, what was the last D? Delegate, get someone else to help you. So yeah, that I found really helpful. I'll stick it in the chat box in case anybody else would be interested in checking.
Thank you for sharing, that's really helpful.
Okay, if there's any more comments, feel free to join comments box, or you can speak out loud, or if you just want to give some feedback on the presentation as well, like Andy did, that's fine.
There's a comment here from Alex Walker, which I'd quite like to talk about. He's put, I know preventing the behaviour is obviously the long-term solution, but are there any legal means of protection women can consider when out on their own? I'm not endorsing buying products like pepper spray, but just wondering if there's any recommended things. There are a lot of things that women do to protect themselves. You know, we carry keys, we have rape alarms, pepper spray, all these kind of things. But again, there's only so much you can do when you're trying to protect yourself, and not everybody has a fight response. Some people have a freeze or a flight response. So even if you're carrying these things with you, they're not always effective. Another thing in it is just a point in general about the legal and judicial systems. You know, as I talked about with rape cases, for example, there's a very, very low percentage of perpetrators that are convicted, 1 to 2%, and especially, unfortunately, with the recent murder of Sarah Everard, you know, women's trust in the police are specifically low. So the legal system and the police, in some respects, are failing women, and this is something which we all have to consider. And this is why it's so important for men, for you guys to step in as peers to help with that protection.
Thank you for that, Bex.
Another comment from Jeremy. What would you recommend when the person says no when you offer help? I remember seeing an argument between a woman and a man, and the woman was sitting down and obviously in pain for whatever reason, came close to her and asked if she needed help, and she said no. I really felt powerless and didn't know what to do. You just have to respect her. If she says no, you have to listen. And this is very, very worrying, but equally, you know, enforcing help and saying, oh, well, you know, as a woman in society, you're at risk, and then almost forcing her or convincing her to take your help is very problematic in itself. So again, the whole thing here is you have to listen to women and respect their choices, because there's no easy way to exist as a woman, whether you take help or you don't. And some women do feel guilty for accepting that help. So again, unfortunately, it is an awful situation because you're clearly worried, but you just have to take no as an answer there.
We've got another question here. You sort of answered it in the presentation as well. When do we think behaviour normalisation starts? Like Seb was saying, I have multiple occasions in school where teachers are excusing boys' behaviour, for example. They are hitting you because they like you, take it as a compliment. Is it the education system that needs to change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think schools need better training on just awareness around the issues covering gender. But yeah, this behaviour, again, normalisation starts, you know, we're socialised according to our gender before we've even set foot on this earth. So it starts literally from the moment somebody assigns you a gender. This is so difficult because, again, it's an institution, it's schools, but again, I think you just have to go to the school and say, actually, this is just so not okay. Here you're normalising violence. So yeah, it starts from the moment you're born, and it, you know, this is an issue which is systemic. It's a societal systemic issue, and it needs wide scale kind of affirmative action, and we will find it in every institution we go into, unfortunately. So we just have to keep speaking up and challenging these norms.
Okay, thanks for that, Bex. We've got probably time for one or two last questions, unless there's more, before we close up. So
I've got something to ask as well. So there was a question from Katie in the chat asking the men on the call, like, when did you first realize that the experiences that women have are so much different to what we as men have? And there's been some interesting responses on that as well. So I guess a question for all the guys, and you haven't necessarily got to answer right now, or just sort of take it away and think about it, but the issues that we've talked about on today's call, that the main cause is men, it's us. So, I've got an answer to this as well, but at what point for each of the guys did you realize that it's men who are the issue? The fact that you're on the call kind of gives me the idea that you're thinking along them lines, but when did it kind of click? It's like, shit, this is on us. This is on how we were as boys, how we behave as men, and just one to think about. I'll give my semi kind of answer. I think there was a marked difference to how I perhaps was at school, going to an all boys secondary school, a kind of language that we'd use about women. Bex raised, I think the word dehumanization, like, girls were conquests or something to go after to prove masculinity. And then I suppose for me, then going to uni, having a lot more female friends, peers, equals, and then understanding it. And it wasn't like a sudden snap, it was just sort of like over time, you're like, fucking hell, like, guys, we really, we're the causing the issue here. And yeah, just, I guess, a kind of like, if we're going to start trying to advocate change around ourselves, it's good to start with each of us as individuals. So just, yeah, that is a kind of general question. And again, if people have an answer that they want to share now, it'd be really good to hear. If it's one that people need to sort of take away and think about, I think that might be useful as well.
I remember I always knew about the issues, but I never really felt them. And I think there was a big disconnect from just knowing theoretically that women suffer a bit more from mental health issues or whatever because of men. But I think I really realized the importance of it and the dramatic impact when they were circulating on social media these little questionnaires about how they had a list of little questions saying, have you been harassed, or have you done something that you didn't like or do for a man or whatever. And it was, I can't remember how many questions. And I think I filled like a couple, and then all the girls I knew filled like 10 or 15, which was crazy. And I think that's when I really realized the huge difference there is.
I'm going to say it's like I said, like in child, first inkling about like different responses was kind of like cycling back from school, because literally talking middle of South Wales, countryside, and none of the girls really cycled to and from school, whereas a lot of the boys did, which is strange when you think about it. In terms of like the bit about like realizing that it's not a problem of like violence against women, as in like it's women as a passive recipient of violence. It's like that it is male violence. It's, without wanting to make this like a about me thing or whatever, but like I grew up into kind of like punk rock and alternative music, and kind of like when you go up to London and you get like punched or like one time in the local street, got again in the middle of the country, kicked off my bike. It's never women. Never is the wrong word, but majority of the time it's men. And that's, for me, female friends, male friends, it's the perpetrators are generally men for public violence, stranger violence. It's, yeah, there's an entire huge dimension which we as men don't suffer from as victims, but the key link is that it's male violence. We make it acceptable to, and like Bex said in the start of the talk, the entire thing of like, oh, boys' toys, guns, swords. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Shah, there's a couple more questions. Should I answer them? There's a
Yeah, of course.
Sheila, brilliant.
Go for it.
Says, greetings. One video we watched today showed a female runners group learning some self-defense, self-protective moves. Is studying these skills an answer against male violence? So again, my answer to this is, if we're going to solve this issue, we have to look at the root cause, and that is men enacting violence on women. And again, these approaches have been for women to protect themselves, which will only get us so far. So while yes, at the moment, it is really good to know how to practice self-defense and to protect yourself to some degree, it's not the answer against male violence. The answer is men being accountable and changing these societal norms.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms, sorry, just Bex, in terms of like your knowledge and experience with this, I mean, I think Andy said about like the hollowback stuff with like deflection and things like diffusement.
Yeah.
What do you think are like the most successful, kind of like if you were to kind of like lay it out from kind of like, this is a successful intervention?
Yeah, so I think the one thing you have to remember is empower the woman, empower the victim. So the first thing you can do is ask, like, are you okay? Is there anything you'd like me to do? It's literally as simple as that. And the main thing in this scenario is, whatever the perpetrator is doing, like, do not be confrontational with the perpetrator. Obviously, you might have to physically get in the way, just to block the line of sight or something. But you know, the whole point here is you want to empower the woman. You want to help her feel safe. And it's similar to this example we were talking about before, you know, when someone said, oh, you know, I really want to help and I really want to walk her home, but she's saying no. You know, you need to listen to what the woman is saying. So if you're not sure, just turn around and say, hey, are you okay? I can see that something's happening. It might make you feel a bit uncomfortable. What would you like me to do in that situation? And it's that simple. But yeah, hollowback is really great. Does a lot of work. So if you're looking for more guidance on specific situations, it can also offer that. But I think the main thing to remember is just ask the woman and try and empower her.
Okay, Thanks for that, Bex. And I've got another comment here about the self-defense. Maybe those skills at least boost female confidence, and that may help in avoidance. So
I think, yeah, in this sense, like you can't avoid it, because if a man is going to enact violence on you, a man's going to enact violence on you, right? Like you can't stop a man from doing that to you, but you can try and protect yourself to some degree. And absolutely, if you feel empowered by that, go for it and do it. If it helps you, makes you feel safer, then 100% do it. And as I said, there's no right or wrong way to react. There's no right or wrong way to protect yourself in the way that society is currently.
yeah, I agree with that. I think sometimes if it works for you, then it's probably a good thing to do it. But yeah, it won't work for everyone. No right or wrong in that. Okay. Is there any more comments or questions?
Maybe a comment. It's really difficult to explain because I really understand the issue we're facing, and that, you know, it's a bigger society issue that we're looking at, but in the end, and I really appreciate everyone speaking up, and I don't know if it makes sense, but I'm going to share it. But personally, I consider myself a rather tough woman. And when I look back on some incidences, I think I got away really, really lucky. Yes, I know the experience of having a key in my hand, walking home really fast, and, you know, trying to keep a distance to men that I sense are just weirdos. But I don't want to be depending on men. That's kind of where I'm struggling that I feel we're going back in, I don't know, 50 years again, where I don't know how many centuries that women need to rely on men to protect them. And I don't know, does that make sense? And it's just, I don't want this to be necessary, but this is kind of the essence where we are right now. And not only in this discussion, right? It's a bigger discussion we're seeing everywhere, that yes, men need to stand up more, speak up, be an advocate for women to feel protected. And I don't want to feel that I need to be protected.
I totally understand you in this case. And it's this, I totally understand, it's this kind of trope that, again, you're fed as a kid, like, oh, as a woman, you're a princess, you're someone to be saved by a knight in shining armor. And one of my favorite feminist accounts posted something the other day, actually. They said, you know, men are the protectors, but who are men protecting us from? Men are protecting us from men. So it's this weird thing where, you know, men are painted as these, you know, people that protect you, but actually as a woman, men are the ones enacting violence on you. So it's not so much that, you know, men in this case, you know, men are knight in shining armors to protect you from the world. You know, this is men talking to other men to stop men from enacting violence. It's not so much that, it's not to say that you are weak or you can't handle it yourself, because, you know, as you said, you're a tough woman, you probably could, but it's that in that sense, you know, these situations are very traumatic for women. And if we can get men to solve this situation, which they need to, then that's the solution to the problem. Because, you know, if you don't say to other men, you know, you need to talk to men to say that this is unacceptable. We're not gonna solve the solution, because so far it's been on women, protect yourselves and handle these situations, but we're not getting to the root of the problem, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
But yeah, I totally appreciate how, you know, and you are totally in your right. If a man comes and says, hi, can I help you? You are totally in your right to say, actually, no, I can handle this myself. And again, as a woman, if you feel empowered doing that, then there's no right or wrong way to handle these situations, because either way you're doomed. So whatever suits you, and don't feel guilty about your approach.
If I can add to that and hopefully help a little bit. There was, in Switzerland, there was a case, there was an article that was that came in the news, and it was basically two guys who raped another guy, right? So I think we're talking about women, but it's definitely an issue of men being violent, and it just depends on their sexual orientation, basically. And unfortunately, the majority of people are heterosexual, and that's why I guess most of the violence is against women, but it still happens against men who are gay, right?
Yeah, I think what you said is important to recognise that, you know, violence against men and boys is an issue as well. This is an issue, and it does happen. You know, in these conversations, we're absolutely not saying that this doesn't happen. And often men find it really difficult to speak up about these things because, again, the way that society has socialised them. So in this issue, we're talking about violence against women and girls, and looking at it because it is a societal systemic issue, and it happens a lot for most women. But that's not to say that violence against men and boys is any less important to speak about. And again, it does happen to other men, and men enact violence on men too.
Yeah, I think it was just to remind people that it's actually men committing violence, just in general, not necessarily against girls, but it's really men being violent and dumb and stupid and whatever.
I was going to say, I mean, it's one of the things with interventions which is, as a man, it's kind of like it's concerning is the thing of in terms of like non-sexual violence, I feel like it's a lot more acceptable for men to hit other men. And I've seen it with friends actually end up with kind of like trying to help a woman who's being harassed and then getting assaulted. I don't even know where I'm going with that.
No, it's a good point, and I think an analogy I saw the other day was, you know, if a man walks into a bar and hits another man, you know, he's kind of, people might label him as just having a bad day or whatever, but if a woman walks into a bar and hits a man, she's labeled as crazy, psycho, whatever, and just in general, violence, you know, men perpetrating violence is more acceptable. And unfortunately, in these heightened situations, if you do step in as a man and there's a perpetrator there, it can very quickly kind of blow up and come to the front when you suddenly are engaging in violence with another man. And again, this is why it's so important to turn to the victim to say, what can I do to help you? Because you just don't want to blow that situation up, because unfortunately the way society is, violence between men is very acceptable, and it's a likely probability if you confront the perpetrator.
Yeah, that's kind of like where it's because I don't want to go down the gender stereotypes role of being like, oh, because I'm a man, I can like take the risk of the confrontation, and I'm not strong. I'm not big. I'm not good at fighting. And there's that, again, going back to what you were saying about gender stereotypes all the way through society, is the thing of you're a guy, you're meant to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and it absolutely shouldn't be like that. And again, it harms both men and women. And this is a prime example. You know, it's can be scary to step into these situations where someone is a perpetrator and to stand up for them, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
And then there's this expectation that you're meant to step in and be violent. And again, that's not the way to solve these issues. It's turn to the victim and ask, are you okay? And, you know, men, again, don't feel like you have to step in as the big man in the situation and again perpetuate these stereotypes. Just turn to the victim and say, I'm here as a person to help you, no matter what my gender is. And again, women, we can do this as well. But again, this talk has been focusing on how men can help the situation. but just turn to the victim and say, what can I do to help you, and try not to engage and escalate the situation.
It's that danger of the perpetrator. It's like you're saying about like your example, like if a man walks into a bar and punches another man, or if a woman walks into a bar and punches a man. But imagine if a man walks into a bar and punches a woman. Everybody would be just.
Well, you'd like to think.
That public violence, yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to think that actually the reality of the situation is, and again, this is come back to statistics of women running, for example. You know, when I said 94% of women, 94% of the cases, nobody stepped in. You know, society is more than happy to step in, and I think again, it is a scary situation. A lot of people think, oh, you don't know what's happened between them, and these kind of tropes. You know, if you watch a man hit a woman, for example, it's, I don't know what's happened in the relationship. I don't know this. I don't know that, and again, society is bad at listening to women and taking women's safety seriously. So you'd hope that people would be up in arms, but actually looking at the statistics, people aren't as much as they should be.
Yeah, that's maybe I don't know, idealistic.
Okay, right. We're going to bring it to a close, but before we do, I just want to say thanks again to Bex for leading the session and for everyone tuning in. It's been great to get all of your feedback, all of your comments. And yeah, there's definitely a big job to be done for all of us men here in this room. I've definitely learned a lot today, and I guess if we can all play our part, and you know, we can't make a huge difference because this is like a societal thing, but we can make a difference in our own way. And I think it's about educating ourselves and all the men around us, all the touch points we have with men. What can we do? And if we've got any platforms like we have this platform, we should use our platforms to raise awareness and to get the message out. It's not cool for violence against women or any harassment of any type. And if we do see something, it's like we've had a lot of good advice here from Bex and others in this group. So yeah, just please use that. And main thing is look after yourselves. You know, don't put yourself in danger. But yeah, just do the right thing. Doing the right thing. Sometimes you may not know what it is, but hopefully today you've got some tips that might help you get there where you need to get to. But this is just the first in the series of our talks on gender equality and violence against women, etc. We're going to have more throughout the year. So if you enjoyed this one, please do share that with other people. We're going to put this online as well. We've recorded it. So if you want to replay it or send your friends over to have a look, please do so. But yeah, we'll have more of these talks in the coming months. So thank you all once again, and yeah, wishing you a great rest of the evening. Thank you so much, Bex.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's really good talk.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bex.
you.
Very
Bye.
nice.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.